it's Tina and I am back, and I am here with a video that I think you guys will find useful. And I did mention in a couple of my haul videos that I wanted to do a swatch fest for my Bobbi Brown eyeshadows. Now, I don't see a lot of swatch fest or swatch videos featuring Bobbi Brown eyeshadows, and I think you guys need to see these eyeshadows because they are phenomenal. Not a lot of people mention them because they're a higher end, higher priced brand, but there are some real winners in the lineup and I think they are worth checking out. So I'm gonna jump into the swatches so you can see them in all their glory, and they're mostly matte shades that I have in my collection, but I'm also gonna show you my Bobbi Brown University eyeshadow palette. And this guy is just a collection of 12 shades from Bobbi Brown. A lot of the permanent shades are in this palette, so if you wanted to get a palette so you can test them out at a better price point, there are 12 shades included in this. So I'm gonna share swatches of this as well, and there are also permanent shades in this palette that you can pick up as singles as well. So let's go ahead and jump into the swatches. First shade up is number 3, Banana, which is described as a buttery cream eyeshadow. And this is a yellow toned beige shade. It pretty much blends in with my skin, so it makes a nice blending shade in my crease. Let's see if I can build that up a little bit more so you can see it. It doesn't really build up on my skin, but hopefully you can tell that it's just a yellow toned ivory or beige shade. Then we have shade number 4, which is Taupe, which is described as a warm taupe shade. And this is another skin tone color for me. It's a warm tone tan shade with a little tint of a gray undertone, hence the warm taupe. Then we have shade number 5, Camel, which is described as a medium camel shade. And this one is an orangey toned, very warm toned medium brown shade. This one is a great shade for those of you who like those warm orangey brown shades in the crease. And then we have shade number 6, which is gray, and it's described as a light gray. And this one is just a light gray toned taupey shade. Again, a great color for working in the crease if you like cool tone crease shades. Then we have shade number 10, Mahogany, which is a matte gray tone brown shade. It's a beautiful, again, a very neutral tone for building up in the crease. And this one would actually work great for a smoky eye because it's not quite a black, it's just a rich gray tinged brown shade. And then we have number 11, Rich Brown, which is a deep espresso brown shade. Again, another great shade for neutral smoky looks, but this one is a little bit more warm toned coffee brown. Then we have shade number 13, Cocoa, which is more of a warm tone brown shade. This is what I would probably call a milk chocolate brown. Again, a great shade for everyday looks. Then we have number 14, Toast, which is an orangey peach toned beige shade. This one is a great transition shade again for warm looks or light looks. It can even work as a highlight. And then we have number 21, Blonde, which is a medium toned matte taupe shade. This one again, great transition shade for everyday neutral looks. And then we have the shade 24, Smoke, which is just a smoky gray brown shade. This one is like a deep gray brown, and I really like that shade as well. It definitely has a very strong gray undertone and less brown in it. Since it's a neutral color, it would work for a variety of skin tones and for a variety of looks. And here again are all those shades swatched. We have a lot of beautiful neutral colors. All of them swatch beautifully, except maybe the first shade, which is Banana. It's a little bit more sheer in pigmentation and it doesn't really build up well, but that has to also do with my skin tone. Since it blends in so well with my skin tone, it would actually work as a great transition shade for me. But the other shades build up quite nicely with no issues. They go on smoothly and pigmented without being patchy or overly powdery, and they don't dust off easily. They do stick to the skin pretty well. And I like all of these shades for everyday looks. As you can see, there are a lot of neutral colors here, some nice smoky tones, some great browns, some great taupes, and some great crease shades. I really love the shade selection. There are a lot of neutral shades that you can do a lot with in this collection. Moving on to some of the colorful shades, we have the shade number 27, which is Black Plum. And this one is a rich, deep, dark brown shade with a plum undertone. So it looks like a rich, dark espresso brown. And it's a really unique shade because it has that burnt plum undertone to it. It's just really, really great and different from a lot of brown shades on the market. And then we have the shade number 32 Espresso, which is a blackened espresso brown shade. This one has a bit of a gray undertone to it again, and a lot of Bobbi Brown's shades have a gray or neutral undertone, so they work for the majority of skin tones. And this one is so rich and deep, it's almost black. And this would be a great alternative to just a matte black shade because it has the depth and richness, but it's not too intense and overpowering as a matte black can be. And then we have the shade 36, which is Rich Navy, which is just a deep matte navy shade. And it's a beautiful deep blue color, and it applies beautifully, and I've used this in a couple of looks and I really like the result of it. It applies beautifully in the crease with that rich blue undertone to it. You still see the blue, but it's rich and deep, and it can add a smoky effect to a look. Then we have shade 58, which is Balsam. This is the only non-matte shade I have as a single. It's a rich, deep kind of jungle green shade. It has a rich blackened base to it with the green shimmer. Again, a beautiful shade, and it has a little bit of yellow gold as well. And then last up we have the shade 94 Mulberry, which is the only failure shade for me from the collection. This one is a matte grape shade, and it applies as sheerly and as patchy as you see it on my arm there. It doesn't really build up well or apply well in looks. It does give you that choppy, patchy effect. So I wouldn't recommend this shade at all. The other shades pass with flying colors, but this shade is just a complete fail. So skip this one for sure. And again, here are those shades. Again, the matte, rich, deep shades are really beautiful. They apply well, layer up great, and have great pigmentation without coming off patchy. And they're great shades that you don't necessarily see from every brand of eyeshadow. They're just rich and smoky. So if you love dark, smoky looks, these are some great shades to complement your collection because they're not just matte black. They have different undertones to them. And then that purple shade is just a crazy disappointment. It looks beautiful in the pen, but when it applies to the skin, it's just very patchy. Especially on the eyes, it's very difficult to build up. And that one metallic green shade is actually also a very beautiful shade as well. Now here are the swatches for the Bobbi Brown University Eyeshadow Palette. The first shade up is Ivory, which is, like the name suggests, a matte ivory shade. And this one applies kind of sheerly on my skin tone. It really doesn't build up much. I'm trying to build up the color, but again, the intensity isn't there. It's more of a sheer highlight shade. Then next to that, we have the shade Cream, which is a metallic finish. And this one is a frosty ivory shade with a touch of peach to it. It has a very intense shine, as you can see. It's very bold, and it would definitely work great as an inner tear duct highlight. And then we have the shade Stone, which is also a metallic finish. And this one is a taupe beige shade. It has a bit of silver to it, a bit of a sandy champagne, and it's also metallic, but it doesn't have as intense a sheen as the cream shade, but it's definitely a beautiful shimmery shade. And then we have the shade Antique Rose, which is just a matte peachy rose shade. It actually comes off a lot more peachy on my skin tone than a rose, but it blends in with my skin, so it would make a great transition shade in my crease. And it does build up pretty smoothly. You just can't see it intensely on my skin tone since it blends in so well. And then in the second row, we have the shade Birch, which is more of a khaki brown shade with a hint of gray undertone to it. Nice color, it builds up pretty decently, but it doesn't really show that intensely on my skin tone. And then next to that we have the shade Heather, which is more of a dusty rose shade. It's a matte finish. This shade also has a touch of lavender undertone to it. It's quite an interesting color. It builds up decently, nothing too intense, nothing too great. It's more of a transition shade to me. And then we have the shade Fog, which is a gray tone neutral shade. This one is mostly a matte, but it has a little bit of sparkle to it that doesn't really show up on the skin, but it makes it blend a little bit more easily. And then we have the shade Black Charcoal, which is a metallic eyeshadow. But this one to me is more of a sparkly eyeshadow. It has a dirty charcoal base with silver sparkle, and it's very chunky, and that's gonna definitely give you a lot of fallout with that shimmer. The shimmer doesn't really stick to the skin. It wants to flake all over the place. So that color is not really an impressive one. It doesn't perform very well. So be careful with that. Use a very sticky base if you want to use that shade. And then moving on to the last row, we have the shade Caviar, which is a matte blackened charcoal shade. It's not a full matte black shade, but it's definitely a rich charcoal shade. That's a great alternative to black. And then next to that we have Black Plum, which is a matte deep brown shade with a reddened plum base, and it has perfect pigmentation. And then the next shade is Ivy, which is a matte army green shade. This one has a little bit of a, I would say, an olivey undertone. It's really beautiful. It's not like a grass green matte. It's definitely a more subdued, dirty green shade. Really beautiful and has great pigmentation. And then last up we have the shade Navy, which is just a matte navy blue shade. It has a bit of like a smoky gray cast to it. Really beautiful. Again, it's not like a in-your-face blue. It's more of a smoky charcoal blue shade, if that makes sense. So again, here are those shades swatched. The first shade is not my favorite. It doesn't really build up very well. And then the shimmery metallic shade doesn't apply well, and these sparkles are a fallout nightmare. These four shades as well don't build up very well. They don't have great in-your-face pigmentation, but that might not be a bad thing if you're going for a very light look, or if you're just using them as a transition shade. You don't really need them to have full-on pigmentation. So if you're going for a more subtle look, these may be good shades for you. And then these last four smoky shades are perfect. They have such great pigmentation. They apply well. They're not patchy at all. They have intense color payoff, and they build up beautifully. So these four shades and these two shimmer shades as well are really gorgeous. The shimmer shades would make great inner tear duct highlights. So it's a great selection of Bobbi Brown shades for you to try out. The rich deep shades definitely make the palette worth it for me. But if those aren't your kind of shades, this palette may not be worth it. And if the other shades fall flat for you, they may not be worth it as well. Alright guys, so now that you've seen the swatches, let's go ahead and talk about the eyeshadows. And like I said, they're mostly matte eyeshadows that I swatched for you because I think their matte eyeshadows are some of the best on the market. And their shimmer eyeshadows seem to be okay as well, but they're cheaper alternatives that I think perform better if you're looking for shimmery and frost shades. So I'm going to focus mainly on the matte shades because they are just superb. So the eyeshadow description says, a silky matte eyeshadow for shading lids, lining eyes, and defining brows that goes on smoothly and blends easily. These retail for $25 each. As I mentioned, they're a bit pricey. They're higher up there. They're more expensive than Makeup Forever eyeshadows. They're more expensive than Kat Von D eyeshadows, Urban Decay eyeshadows. They're a higher price point, but they're a little bit cheaper or along the same price of like a Dior or a NARS eyeshadow. So keep that in mind. They're a little bit pricey, but I promise you they are worth the investment. You do get 0.08 ounces of product. Yes, 0.08 ounces of product, which is a great value for the price because a MAC eyeshadow is 0.04 ounces. So you're getting double the amount of product for a steeper price, but you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. And these eyeshadows come in these sleek little black compacts. They are a square shape, which makes them pretty easy to store on their sides if you want to stack them and store them and organize them that way. But the great thing about the Bobbi Brown eyeshadows, you can keep them in their single compacts like this, which features a transparent lid with the Bobbi Brown logo, and you can see the color through the lid. So if you store them upright, you can see the color and easily grab them. And then on the back of the compact, you have the name of the eyeshadow, some manufacturing details, and the size information. And these are secured by a tab fit. So there is a little tab that snaps closed. Great, sleek, very thin packaging. It's a joy to store, but it gets even better because these are easy to pop out of the pans. You don't have to depot them. You don't have to apply heat. You simply push up from the bottom and they pop right out because they're secured by little integral tabs at the sides. You pop them out easily like this. The label is still on the back. And then you can pop them into these empty customizable palettes that Bobbi Brown also has available. She has a 4-pan palette. You can store 4 of the eyeshadows. And these palettes feature a full-size mirror in the lid that you can use for makeup application. And they also snap securely closed. And the eyeshadow labels with the name will still be visible at the back of the palette because they are little snap-in palettes that have the empty little slots for your eyeshadows. They have a 4-pan palette and they also have a 6-pan palette available. So depending on the size of your collection and how you want to organize them, you can get a 6-pan or a 4-pan palette. And these are $10 and they're available where the Bobbi Brown eyeshadows are sold. I think it's really great to customize your eyeshadows. I think it's a great way. Even though the packaging is already sleek, it's a nice way to organize and travel with your shadows and just keep your collection nice and organized and not overcrowded. As far as product and performance goes, out of all of the matte shades that I showed you, I only had one flop shade, which was the Mulberry shade number 94, which is that beautiful purple shade. It takes a lot of work, it gets patchy, it's just a miserable shade to work with, but the other shades are gorgeous, and these are wearable everyday shades that anyone can enjoy. Sometimes you'll have trouble finding these rich pigmented smoky shades with the different undertones that really live up to the pigmentation and the blendability that you're looking for. A lot of deeper, darker shades from other brands can get patchy, can get chalky, can just really give you a hard time to work with, but these shades are rich, they're creamy, they're pigmented, and they're easy to blend, which is something that you need with mattes. You need them to be easy to blend without losing the pigmentation, and I find that to be true for the Bobbi Brown eyeshadows. So I do think they're completely worth checking out. Even though they're pricey, if you pick a couple of shades that you know you're gonna get full use out of, or you've been searching for this great dark shade or a shade for your crease or a shade for your brows and you just haven't found the right one, check out Bobbi Brown. They're available at Sephora. They're also available in different department stores, so Macy's, Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's, Saks Fifth Avenue. You can find them there, swatch them for yourselves, play around with them, find a shade, find a couple of shades that you really love, and just go at it. The shimmer shades, again, I think you can find better quality eyeshadows in cheaper brands that perform equal, if not better, to these shades. So I would stick to the mattes in the lineup, but definitely I highly recommend them even with the steep price point. So hopefully this video was helpful. I did want to show you swatches so you can get a look at the shades and see if there are any that you're interested in. So if you like this video, definitely hit thumbs up, share, and favorite. And I will leave a full list set here in the video. Well, not everything, but I'll leave the names of the eyeshadows and where you can pick these up in the description box, as well as links to my Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook page. And until my next video, which will be very soon, I'll talk to you. Bye, guys.